Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 121 HD remake Is It Worth the Grind video. And the answer is still no. Unless you have the other, the Russian tier 10 mediums already, at least two of them. But is the tank shit? No, it's not. It's kind of funny tank to play, but if you compare it to the general competition, it's not as good. If you really are into Chinese tanks, you'll be fine with this, but recommending to grind the entire line for this tank is a bit silly when you have the Russian tanks being in the game. So let's look at the armor and let's get into the game and let's not waste the time. So 120, good on paper, like T54 one might think, but the angles on this are not very good. The sloping is not very strong. And the frontal plate is way weaker than on the 113. People who said that this thing has the same armor as the 113, you have no clue what you're talking about. This is way worse. 200, unangled plate will be 200. You have an obviously lower plate with 150. So this tank is going to be easy to pen for every tank you meet. When you angle your front, your side is going to be vulnerable. It's impossible to angle this tank in a way that you don't take any damage if the enemies hit you well. But you can get your occasional bounces from the front plate, but where this tank shines, well, somewhat shines, is the turret armor. 251, this is no messing around, this is really strong, and you can't really expect to pen this very easily. These zones here are obviously the flattest armor. You can get like 240, 241, so it's not like it's impenetrable for the tier 10 guns. And another bad news for this tank is that it has weak cupolas compared to something like a T62A. It's not even funny. This is 200 armor. Again, tier 10 guns will punch straight through this. Tier 8s might struggle. And this cupola on this side is also the same. You can get some unlucky angles here and get like 280 armor. But you shoot something that is more or less flat, you shouldn't have too many problems of penning things. Let's now look at the soft stats, because I figured that's one of the most important things you can look in this tank inspector. So aiming circle spread is actually not that bad. Like everything is below, but the difference between this and, for instance, the T62A is not that big. Well, it is a quite noticeable difference, but then again, this gun is bigger and it's not like this tank is like, holy shit, you can't aim with it straight. However, when we come to the power to weight ratio and terrain resistance, we have bad news for this tank. So power to weight is not that bad. It's really close to 62A, but again, fuck you, because minus 50%, and on soft terrain it's not that bad. But this minus 50% and this minus 50% makes this tank a really sluggish medium tank. It's one of the it's probably the slowest medium tank in tier 10, which is quite sad for it. It still goes faster than 40 on the flat, but it struggles to get up there. So yeah, that's everything there is to say about this tank in the tank inspector. Let's get into the replay. Here we go, playing on Fisherman's Bay, tier 10 game obviously. Let's look at the mobility stats then, shall we? So as you see, this tank picks up speed fairly bad. It takes quite a while to reach the top speed of 50, whatever it was, 56. But it goes faster than 40 quite quickly as well. So comparing it to an FE4202 is still, this tank still goes faster over long distances. It climbs hills obviously way worse, and it can struggle in the short distance runs, but in long runs it will pick up its top speed, which is not bad, 56 kilometers an hour, and it will keep it fairly well unless you climb hills. So we have seen all the bad things, well, not all the bad ththings, but mostly bad things about the 121. Where does it shine? Why is it not a bad tank then? Well, the gun on this tank is quite unique. It is the 122mm gun, fires AP as standard ammo, which gives it another disadvantage over the other tier 10 mediums. The shot speed is around 50% worse than on any other tier 10 medium tank that fires APCR ammo, and that's all of them really. Accuracy on the gun 0.35, pretty good. Aiming time, however, 2.7 seconds, which kind of forces you to use gun length drive on the medium tank, which is usually quite a pain in the ass. Dropping coated optics is always a bad thing to happen to you. Penetration 258, not very high, but still high enough for penetrating any tank frontally. Damage per shot 440, which is the highest alpha of the of any tier 10 medium with the standard ammo, obviously. DPM 2750, standard value. You can obviously buff that to more than 3k probably. Well, definitely. And the worst thing about this tank has to be the gun depression, -3 degrees. It is really pain. It's a real pain in the ass. You always have to be on the flat. You have to think about where you'll have gun depression and where you won't have gun depression. Once you get used to it, it's not that bad, but it takes some getting used to. If you play the previous Chinese tier 9s, tier 9 and 8 with the bigger gun, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about here. 3 degrees is close to nothing. You can barely shoot right in front of you on the flat ground. If something like an ELC parks behind you, you probably can't even shoot it, even though you're a medium tank. A lot of times you'll find yourself struggling to shoot something like a lower plate of an IS-7 because you don't have enough gun depression. Sometimes you'll find yourself struggling to shoot a lower plate of an E100 because you don't have the gun depression. And it can be really painful, so in close range you have to think ahead. Can you even pen the tank you're about to rush or not? But overall, the gun is great. If you get enough gun depression, if you can keep it on target, then the gun is gonna do miracles. This DPM on this kind of an alpha damage gun is really, really good compared to some other medium tanks. If you compare this to something like an E50M, which probably has the worst DPM of all the tier 10 mediums that actually don't have auto loader, this gun reloads almost as fast as the E50M, but it fires for 440 average instead of 390, which gives you that edge in those fights. Playing a bit too aggressive now, this is never gonna end well for me. Shoot the ground like a scrub. He bounces as well, but I'm gonna get the prototype shot in return. So that was too risky, too ballsy. That no point of playing like that. Even if I hit the Leopard, it would not have been worth it at all. So equipment on this tank is the obvious rammer, the obvious word staffs, and not so obvious, but I think necessary gun length drive. Without that, this gun is gonna struggle a lot to keep. You're gonna struggle a lot to keep it on target. Even I'm here taking a lot of silly shots, and my accuracy in the end of this game is gonna be pretty poor. But without a gun length drive, you'll struggle a lot to take snapshots and shit like that. If you compare this tank to some of the others, this tank is unique. The gun is unique. It feels unique. It is kind of fun to play. So I cannot blame anybody or even say anything to anybody that likes this tank a lot, because I like it as well. But the fact is that the problems with the tank are too major for me to recommend it to everybody. The gun depression is the lack of gun depression is not for everybody to begin with, and the kind of a derpy gun and the slow platform with almost no hull armor is also not a very good combination. A lot of times you will find yourself showing your entire tank or showing the top of your turret to your enemies just to get gun depression, just to be able to shoot them, which will make your armor even worse than it is. 120 upper plate, as I said, looks good on paper, but as you saw, there's not much more than 200 armor on the upper plate, so do not expect miracles from that upper plate. It's not gonna save you. It's mostly there just to make you slower. But while the turret has weak spots, it's still way better than turrets on tanks like the 140, like on the 430. The turret actually can bounce. You see, this is really satisfying to shoot a tier 10 heavy tank for 510 damage and do it every 8 seconds. That is really, really good. This tank is really good at that. It has to expose itself less to the enemies to do a lot of damage to them just because of this heavy hitting gun. It doesn't get the feeling that you get in the 62A. If I peek there again, I'll get shot by Artie. But with this tank, it's not that easy to peek to begin with, so you mostly get yourself in some kind of a brawling situation where the armor of this tank kind of doesn't work out for you, but it's still better than to try to peek for gun depression somewhere, because this tank doesn't have any. The situation we're in is a bit fucked up. We're losing 2-8. That is not the spot you really want to be in. But the thing is, on this map, if you rush 1-2 line, it's not a very strong position. You cannot really push into a cap circle. And you'll see the enemies try to do that and fail horribly. But the thing is, the key position on this map is the position where I'm in. You're watching the middle. You're spotting the tanks in the middle for your campers. You can help the city if they get rushed, and you can do a lot of things. And look how the game came back. Not that I did anything, but the game came back just because of the enemies had quite poor positions, and now just trying to work with my gun depression. I'm not even bothering to turn my tank frontally against those enemies. It's better to run away than to expect to bounce a shot with this. One thing I would recommend you to do if you want to have more tier 10s, obviously, is to go for the heavy line as well. Go for the heavy and the medium line. They complement each other. If you get the tier 7 heavy tank before you get the tier 7 medium tank, you get the top gun on the medium tank already. And there's a lot of things that both lines have in common. So I would highly recommend you to get the heavy and the medium. Then I can justify grinding this Chinese tech tree. Otherwise, getting the light tank. Light tank is fun, but light tank isn't a tier 10. It cannot affect the battle that much, and I would really recommend you to go for the heavies and the mediums. Otherwise, I can't see a point to grind only one tank in this line. And don't be afraid from the people that say the 113 is utter shit, that it has no armor, that it's just the worst 121. That tank actually has a lot going for it. People that enjoy mobile heavy tanks will enjoy the 113 a lot. It has much better frontal plate. It gets around 250 armor on the upper plate, so it is a big difference. And the tank is actually doesn't feel much slower, and it has really good. Well, it doesn't have really good gun depression. It has better gun depression. The gun depression on the 113 is not abysmally bad, but it's still really bad. But yeah, if you want to be different, if you like the challenge, if you like the style of this tank, it's not a bad tank. It really isn't. It is a bit of a pain in the ass to play sometimes when you get on maps where you can only fight if you have gun depression. There's quite a lot of those maps like Sand River and things like that where there's a lot of hold down concealment. Then you are kind of fucked. But as long as you can keep yourself on level ground with your enemies, as long as you're not above them, you're gonna do well. If you're below them, you still will be able to shoot them, but you won't be able to use your armor efficiently at all. And there is actually two ways of grinding this. You can actually get the light tank as well, which is not the worst thing to do. That shot went, I think, through his turret, so-called turret, and the hull. But yeah, there's two ways to grind this tank. You can grind it through the mediums, or you can grind it through the light tanks. It really is up to you. If you like light tanks, you can go for the light tanks. If you don't dislike light tanks, you probably should avoid the 132 because it's a typical light tank. It is a good passive scout. It's not very good at anything that requires you to be spotted and roll. Mediums, tier 7 is really good, tier 8 is really bad, and tier 9 is also pretty damn good. But yeah, in this game you can see how important it is to keep the middle. We kept the middle, we kept the city, we kept two most important flanks. It's always easier to push through the city than to push through the 1-2 line. If you take the 1-2 line, you have to stay back and snipe at what your medium tanks spot. They didn't, they watched the cap circle, they all died. For me, the game was pretty good. I missed a lot of shots, but that's kind of how this gun works. When you hit hard, and when you miss, you're frustrated. And when you need gun depression, you're even more frustrated. And yeah, this is gonna be the last shot of this game. I won't get to shoot another one. And yeah, GG. So there we go, Ace Tanker. 2,746 experience doubled, 7,443 damage done, 1,238 assisted hits, some blind shots, high caliber as well, and Confederate as well. Not a lot of kills. But yeah, the 121, it is a really nice gun on quite a shitty platform. The gun depression alone makes this tank not worth it in my opinion. Well, as your first medium, but if you have played this game for quite a lot, if you can deal with bad gun depression, the 121 is kind of fun. The poor mobility also bites it in the ass, but if you are willing to cope with the disadvantages of this tank, and if you can make use of this gun, the tank can perform really well, as you can see. So my verdict on this tank hasn't changed. If you want to get a good tier 10 medium, if you want to play Clan Wars, get the 62A or more like 140. It seems that that's a better choice for most people. But if you have those already and you want to have something a bit different from the other tanks, then 121 is the one to get. It's really a different medium tank from the rest. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be adding my Facebook and Twitter pages in the description below, so you can go follow those to see when I'm streaming. The overlay on the YouTube video, when it shows that I'm streaming, you can click on that to go to my stream as well. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one.